All right, let me get going here. Let's see. All right, we're going to start. We'll start at 62, and hopefully it'll keep. Oh, it's already 63, so it's going to start growing. Okay, so welcome everybody to our state webinar. Just wanted to go over. I'm Mark Cantor, the president of the State Association, and we do these webinars every week on Fridays now because we want to keep in touch with all the clubs throughout the state of Maryland and the District of Columbia. We want to use this as a tool for us all to keep in this disaster together, to try to answer any questions we can. Questions that we can't answer, we will certainly research it and find an answer. We typically every week bring a guest speaker on. Luckily, we've been able to achieve that. Today we have a special guest speaker, State Senator Brian Feldman, who's going to speak in a few minutes, and I really appreciate him taking the time to come on because I know he's very busy with all the different things that are happening throughout the state of Maryland. A couple things just to touch base on. Number one, this is a recorded call so that you can, and it will be posted on our website for people that either want to hear it again or can't listen to it now and can listen to it later on. So a couple quick rules that we try to implement. Number one, please listen in the mute mode unless you are going to make a statement or ask a live question. A lot of people ask questions throughout the chat, and I'll read those questions and try to get answers for you. If you please be respectful and announce yourself and your affiliation before you speak, so we know who's chatting. So. With that being said, there's not too much to report this week that we haven't reported. There is a little bit of change going on at US Youth, especially since the DA was canceled with US Soccer, and US Youth is in the process now of trying to come up with a program to try to help with the fall of the DA and where those players may land. And Flo's going to chat about that later during this call. So I would like to also, by the way, that the US Youth is in process now of trying to do a deal with the MLS. So it's still a lot of unknowns. Dan Giffin's on board too, and he'll probably chat with us during Flo's speech to help us pull the loose ends in with MLS as far as what he knows. But I'd like to introduce now a friend of mine and our favorite state senator, Brian Feldman, who's going to give us a little bit of insight of what the state of Maryland is doing. And how we're going to progress through this as far as this the state's view of everything. So Brian, come on! Thanks for coming on board, and appreciate you giving us a few words about the state of affairs in Maryland.
Well, Mark, thank you for the invite, and it's great to be here. I guess my thinking here was to maybe just make a bunch of sort of big picture observations, and then, I guess going forward, I'll take some Q&A, but then, use me as a resource. Honestly, if some questions come up, and I'm sure they will after we're done here, and Mark's got all my contact information. If some things specific to any of the folks here on the call come up, shoot me an email and I can see if I can help out. So, does that sound fair? The other thing, I'm glad, Mark, by the way, I'm glad you mentioned that this is recorded. So I'll try to be careful. I always have to ask that because sometimes I get a little too candid and then I realize I'm being recorded and pisses people off. So I tend to be pretty frank about things. So I'm glad to at least know on the front end that they were being recorded. Let me also say, you know, I myself was I played soccer. I was a high school soccer player myself back in my hometown of Pittsburgh before I moved to Maryland, and was an MSI soccer coach for many years, my kids' soccer teams. So, you know, I love the sport. I think what you all are doing, and then just a little bit of background. The other thing I thought, and I don't know how you all are organized, and this may be something that I take up later with Mark, but you know, we have folks come down and visit me all the time when we get back to normal in our state capital. You know, the state capital, Maryland, for those of you, I don't know how many of you have visited there in Annapolis, but it is the oldest state capital in the United States of America currently in use. And there's a tremendous amount of history. And a lot of the young folks come down as groups. I set up nice tours. You can sit in the Senate with me or up in the gallery. You get introduced, you get a standing ovation. It could be big groups, it could be small groups. I've had some of the young kids come down and shadow me for a day, you know, or not the young kids, it could be anybody, but I just put that out there as an offer, you know, in small or big groups. If you'd ever want to take advantage of that, I think it's a beautiful town. It's a very historic state capital. Just kind of, not to get civics 101 here, but in Maryland, like at the federal level, we have a governor, a House, and a Senate. And in the Senate, there's 47 of us for the whole state. There's only 47 senators, and then there's 141 in the House. And then I represent a district, a big part of Montgomery County that goes from Potomac to the south, all the way to the Frederick County border, all the way from Potomac to Poolesville to Germantown to Clarksburg. In fact, one of the things early on in my time in the legislature was to get a bunch of money for Trish, who's on the call, to build that soccerplex in Germantown, which is also in my Senate district. For those of you who have taken advantage of the soccerplex, Trish, who's here, ran that operation. We were able to get a lot of state money over the years to not just get it up, but then expand it over the years. And that was a great partnership between the state, the county, and again, that's one of the jobs that we have in the state legislatures, bring money back to our community. In that case, it wasn't really just benefiting Montgomery, it was benefiting the whole region. So the soccerplex has been a great resource up there in that part of the district, my district, in that part of Montgomery County. But my job primarily in the General Assembly of Maryland is that we make the laws for the state. And we normally do that in our what they call legislative session. We meet every year, primarily from January to April. There's about 3,000 different bills that come into the general legislature every year. It's an unbelievably chaotic situation, but it was made even more chaotic this year because we adjourned early. Instead of ending in the middle of April, we ended on the 18th of March just because of the virus. 3 weeks early. It was the first time we had adjourned in Annapolis in the legislature, the first time since the Civil War. Literally, that's how rare. So it's been, it was 1860 something, the last time we actually adjourned early, but we did do it because of the situation. So, but in the very end of that session, the last 4 days, we packed 3 weeks into work in 3 or 4 days, and we passed literally like 600 bills in 3 days. I mean, it was crazy, crazy, crazy. And among the things we did pass, in anticipation of what we were going to be dealing with when we left there, we passed a bunch of emergency bills specifically dealing with coronavirus. And so we passed things dealing with everything from telehealth that will make it easier for you to see your doctor through, you know, on your computer, to price gouging. You know, people take advantage of the situation, and there's price gouging going on there, and that's a problem. We passed a bunch of laws to prohibit that kind of practice, you know, when products are scarce, whatever they may be. And then we dealt with issues like unemployment insurance. How are we going to deal with this, you know, influx, huge spike in UI claims, and maybe we could talk a little bit about that. So those were some of the things we did on the very last couple of days of session. But since that time, most of my time has been trying to help constituents navigate their way through the really, really complicated programs that have been passed. You've got a series of bills at the federal level dealing with small business and small business loans. And a lot of that has come from the federal government going directly through the SBA, and the banks are lending a lot of that money, and the federal government really has control over a lot of that. And so I have a good pipeline into our federal legislators, our congressmen, our 2 U.S. senators, Cardin and Van Hollen, and we work pretty hand in hand to try to navigate how those programs are working, who got screwed, who got left out, all those kinds of things are on the table, and we get calls on that. So I work with the federal delegation to work through the federal programs. Separately than that, then we have county programs here in Montgomery County, or for that matter, there's county programs all over the state. In Montgomery County, they have a small business emergency grant program that they actually, it was 20 million, and this week they approved another 5 million, $25 million, where you dole out basically $75,000 grants to small businesses. So there's a series of programs here at the Montgomery County level. So similarly, I deal with our county council members to try to figure out that. And then there are the state issues, the state programs. So we have, through our Department of Commerce, the Maryland State Department of Commerce, a bunch of programs that have been up and running, some of which have run out of money, and we're hoping to replenish some of those programs with some money that we hope to get from the federal government. So the Commerce Department is dealing with that, our Maryland Department of Commerce. And then back on the unemployment insurance issue, that has been hugely problematic, for our Department of Labor, which administers that. And so they've worked through a lot of the kinks, and actually today, starting today, they're rolling out, this is at the state level, unemployment insurance. Today, the Department of Labor is rolling out a brand new portal specifically to try to help out our self-employed folks, our gig economy people, our independent contractors. Historically, those people were not eligible to collect unemployment insurance, but because of some changes in the law through the feds and even here in the state of Maryland, those folks are now all eligible. And starting today, you can apply online. It's almost like a one-stop shop process to apply online to get unemployment. And we'll have to see, and we hope that that'll work out. Today, the Department of Labor has opened up their offices now so that they're open even on Saturdays. Starting last week, they opened up on Saturdays. But most of the action is going to be online, so I want to put that out there as well. So those are some things going on, in that area. The other thing are a lot of people seem to want to volunteer, and we have a lot of programs, and I myself have been sending out email blasts with updates and links to volunteer opportunities for people, because there are a lot. People want to help out, they just don't know how to even get started, or where they, how they could help and all that stuff. So there's a lot of opportunities. Again, I'm not going to be able to answer all that stuff or talk about it all today, but to the extent anybody's interested on the call on anything that I'm talking about here, reach out to me through Mark or even my office in Annapolis, which is open, for those opportunities. The other big problem for our state, and this isn't unique to Maryland, is, because of the economy shutting down, we're really dependent as a state on sales tax revenue. And so, it's income tax and sales tax is pretty much where we get all our money at the state level. And we were just told this week that for our fiscal year, which ends on June 30, we're looking for this last couple of month period to take a hit on the revenue side of about $2.5 billion, which for a small state like us is a huge amount of money. And so we're trying to, one of the other jobs we're trying to do is figure out, how do we deal with that? So unlike the federal government, at the state level, and this is true of all 50 states, we have to have a balanced budget. It's constitutionally required. We're not like the federal government that can run these, print money, and send money to whoever and run multi-trillion-dollar deficits. We can't do that at the state level. We're constitutionally required to have a balanced budget, and we have a AAA bond rating and all that kind of stuff, which lets us borrow money cheap. We can, build things like at the soccerplex, but we have to keep our budget balanced. So taking a $2.5 billion hit in such a short period of time is going to present a lot of problems for us. And then there are other kinds of issues popping up all over the place. For example, our universities in Maryland, whether it's University of Maryland, particularly College Park or Johns Hopkins, they're taking massive hits too, because in many cases they're having to give refunds to their students. Plus they have these endowments. They're lost a lot of money in the stock market. You put it all together, and we have to figure out a way, particularly with our public institutions, how do we make sure that the University of Maryland is still standing in the fall, and all the other University of Maryland system schools, from Montgomery College to University of Maryland, everything else to Towson. And so that's a huge problem as well, just the budget stuff. Now we're really, really hoping that the federal government, when they get around to yet another maybe package, that they come and help the state and local governments. That wasn't in the package that passed yesterday. We're hoping, but there's still a big fight about that, whether the feds, who have a bottomless pit of money, will help states like ours, which have, we can't run deficits, and we're basically getting killed with no economic activity. So that's a big problem. So moving forward, the big issue is for everybody, when are we going to reopen, and when are we going to modify, loosen up all the restrictions? And so we're going to get a little feedback today from Governor Hogan, who at 3 o'clock will be making an announcement laying out his vision or his plan about what needs to be in place for us to start to wean off, loosen all these restrictions. What are the criteria? And how are we going to do it? Now, we did get a little glimpse yesterday. He was doing some interviewing around the state yesterday, and he's laid out some criteria about testing and hospital capacity, and then risk levels for business. What businesses are more risky than others? You'll be categorized as a level 1 risk, a level 2, 3, 4 risk. And I think he's going to put more meat on the bones today at 3 o'clock. But that I think is the big issue on the table. And I don't want to jump ahead of the governor, but we'll know a lot more, I think, at 3 o'clock about the path forward. And so, as I said at the outset, Mark, there's a lot here. It's something that's evolving every day. Things are changing, and honestly, new issues and problems keep popping up. Things that I didn't even think about, like, for example, this morning, to give you a glimpse into my world, people are wanting to know, can creditors garnish your stimulus checks? Well, nobody actually sort of thought about, it's not in they're silent, right? The federal bill that threw out $1,200 stimulus checks, nobody thought to sort of clarify, can creditors garnish those? What about liability issues for all of our businesses? If you want to do testing or you're in a situation where you let your employee in and the employee tests positive, or you get a customer in your new business when we reopen and they're positive, what kind of liability situation exposure do you have as a business? And this this is not just a for-profit, we're talking nonprofit. And by the way, I will say all those programs I talked about are, generally speaking, available for nonprofits, all the grant programs and loan programs. And that, it's pretty wide open to nonprofits. But the issue of liability is going to be a big topic going forward for any business that opens up. And again, every day somebody shoots me an email or gives me a call saying, well, what about this? What about that? And in half the time, man, nobody has any answers. We have to try to maybe get some guidance from our Attorney General's office or from the governor's office. And that's where we are. We're kind of in triage mode a little bit here still. So, anyway, that's big picture. I'd be happy to, field some questions. You've got, you can shoot me any emails on, some follow-up. But Mark, I just wanted, without getting the minutia, I just wanted to hit some kind of a glimpse into the kinds of things we're dealing with on a daily and actually hourly basis right now.
Well, it's a good snapshot. Does anybody have any questions for Senator Brian Feldman about anything about the state of Maryland?
Hey, Brian, it's Trish. One question. We're obviously, one of the biggest concerns for all of us is getting back on the field and getting our kids back playing. The decision to open fields or parks or all of that, will that come from the governor's office, or will that be done by the local jurisdictions?
Yeah, well, so I would say, when you look at what's happening around the country, there's this fight between the feds, the states, and the counties. And every state seems to be dealing with it in all candor a little bit differently. I think in our case, because I think for the most part, most of us feel that Governor Hogan's been handling this very professionally. I mean, some of you saw where he went out and did something nowhere else in the United States, no other governor thought to do. He went out and got 500,000 tests directly from South Korea because he was getting frustrated about the inability to get testing here into our state. And he took control, and I thought that was really bold. I would say that because for the most part, everybody seems comfortable with the way the governor's been handling things. I think you're going to get your guidance in this state mainly from the governor. He's going to give us, we'll probably be taking our lead. Now that's not the case in many states. We have, particularly the states that have like Florida and Georgia and Kentucky, you see it already, like in Atlanta, the mayor of Atlanta is attacking, the governor of Georgia for opening up. I don't think you're going to see that in our state. I think that's highly, highly unlikely. So I would be taking my cue in this state from what the governor has to say, and not from the county executives or the county council. But that's a Maryland specific, I would say, situation. That's not necessarily going to be the case around the United States.
Okay, thank you.
Same thing's true, by the way. I mean, you saw last week with the president. The president first said that he had the authority to dictate closure, and the governors, all 50 governors, basically said sorry, but the Constitution says it's up to the states. And the president immediately did backtrack immediately the next day. And I think the White House at this point this is going to be a state-by-state decision. And even now, Georgia, South Carolina, Florida, or whatever, they're not even, looking at the guidance that came from the White House. They're pretty much, states are kind of ignoring that. It's going to be up to the states. And I think our counties will be, but one related issue, since we're talking about youth, don't forget our schools are closed, and the governor, has said the schools will be closed at least until May 15th. And so, one of the things is trying to be as somewhat intellectually consistent here is looking at things that could open and, having it all make sense. So on the one hand, if we have schools closed, I think that keep an eye on what we do with the schools, because, that's probably, that might be kind of a barometer of where the governor's thinking. Right now, our schools in Maryland are closed until May 15th. Whether that remains the case, we may hear today about the schools. I don't know, but everything's kind of interconnected here. So I don't have a good answer for you, but I take the cue from the governor for sure.
Okay.
Brian,
that was a tough question, Trish.
Well, they're all tough, man. There are no easy answers right now. I mean, I'll be honest with you, there are no easy answers.
But he always tells the truth.
Alan, go ahead. Alan, you had a question?
yeah, so just a quick question regarding around the Triple P. Obviously, funding was kind of halted. Is there any, sort of date where more funding will be announced, or and also how does that impact the new sort of decision on self-employed independent contractors in terms of the employment? Is there any challenges there between the two?
No, so we're really talking about two separate sort of issues. So on the PPP topic, just yesterday, the U.S. House passed the next phase, the next $480 billion package that the president now has to sign. Once that is signed, which could be today, he didn't sign it yesterday, it passed out of the House yesterday, but any event, once that's signed, a whole big influx of money is going to flow back down here through the banks. This is coming from the SBA, and the criteria are laid out in the federal law, not in state law, but we should be getting within the, as early as this weekend, quite honestly, assuming that's signed into law today, that PPP program should be basically back up and ready to roll for more applicants. It ran out of, not only did it run out of money, but the folks who ended up, a lot of criticism about who ended up with the money, and ended up with people like Ruth Chris Steakhouse, not the little restaurants that the program was designed to help, the little mom and pop guys. So I don't think, from what I gather, that they necessarily corrected all the problems with the first go around, but I think this is going to be much tighter. But the good news is they passed that yesterday, and the money should be flowing this coming weekend and next week for a new round of applications. But that's going to be up to and a lot of these loans, I think there's going to be more of an emphasis on the local community banks as opposed to the big Wells Fargo and all the rest, because those guys were a little bit of a problem. At first, they only wanted to do business and lend to people businesses that had pre-existing relationship with them, their own customers, and that really turned into a big problem. In fact, there was I think if we go more through the community banks, which is what I think is expected. So if any of you have relationships with your community banks, today would be a good time to reach out to them, because that money should be flowing into a lot of those community banks, if not today, early next week.
Did anybody get funded yet?
Unemployment, no, that's a separate issue. Today is the first day, as I said, that the folks the self-employed and your independent contractors really have an opportunity to go online. And the other thing is those benefits are going to be retroactive. So even though you're only applying today, if you were eligible for unemployment 2-3 weeks ago, when you start getting your benefits, it's going to date back retroactively to your when you became first eligible. But the fact is, today's the day to get on there and get online. And if you were self-employed or independent contract, today would be the day to get on there and get your claim in.
I have a quick question for everybody who's listening. Has anybody been funded yet from the PPP? I have. We were funded about 2 weeks ago through our small community bank. So through my business. So we were really happy. So it is going to work.
Was that the triple P or was that the EIDL?
No, the triple P.
The triple P, okay.
Yeah, essentially it covers payroll for just about 2.5 months. And supposedly if you keep good records and use it for operating expenses, mostly payroll, that supposedly the loan will turn into a grant. That's to keep people paid and, on the payroll, making money so that they're ready to go back to work as soon as things clear up. Any other questions for Brian?
Brian, this is Flo Egan. With regard to the schools, and if by chance they are shut down, as you know, a lot of our soccer clubs in the state of Maryland, we rely on the school facilities as well as facilities like Soccerplex or Carson's Run or any of those other Cedar Lane, the county parks. But do you have any direction that we could possibly work through to find out whether or not the schools will be available to us, the facilities, if they shut them down through the summer?
Right. So I would say, even though I said yesterday on the big picture stuff, I think that is going to be left up to the governor. I think with respect to that topic, I think that one may likely be left up to each county and the county board of education and the county folks to sort of, kind of figure out availability for the fields and that type of thing. That's one where, at least I can't speak for the other counties. Obviously, I'm in Montgomery County, but I have a good relation with our Board of Education. That might be one. I can certainly say that with respect to Montgomery County, that I might be able to help facilitate that kind of conversation with our Board of Education and our county council members, because I think that's one where the governor would probably say, you know, those are the kinds of decisions that can be made by, you know, at the county level. You know? And so I'd be happy to help at least with respect to Montgomery County on that topic, but I think that's going to be a county by county decision once we figure out what we're dealing with the school closure situation. But it's possible, I think it seems unlikely as we sit here today that the schools are going to reopen on the 5th of May. So I would operate on the assumption those schools are going to be closed. And so then the question is, what about the fields and what's the availability of the fields? And if that's your question, I think that's going to be a judgment call probably, you know, because truthfully, again, if you're, you know, in Western Maryland, and there's only one, I mean, you know, the situation is going to be a little different in Prince George's and Montgomery maybe than it is in Garrett County and Washington County and the Eastern Shore for that matter. And some of these topics, I think, maybe don't lend themselves to an easy statewide dictate. But that's put that on the table, and maybe that's one that I could at least we'll get a little clarity. Make it some clarity. Again, I don't know how detailed the governor's going to get today. But let's see what he says at 3 o'clock, but maybe, you know, as a follow-up, I'd be happy to be helpful on that one.
Okay, yeah, because a lot of our clubs, we have 140 soccer clubs in the state of Maryland. Some of them are relatively small clubs, and the biggest piece of their yearly budget is renting facilities, renting fields, right? So we even had some talk about, you know, in the future, is it possible with the county fields or you know, state fields, owned properties that perhaps in the future, maybe a reduced fee or a waiver to help those clubs not go bankrupt, right? And to get the kids back out on the fields.
Look, as I said earlier, that's a really big, that's an important issue. And again, the issues just keep popping up, but that's one, there's no answer right now, but I think that, you know, put that on the list of things that are just not clear right now.
Yep. Okay.
Any other
Thank
questions?
you.
Anybody else have any questions?
Mark, it's Trish again, just like to say one thing. As Brian mentioned, we've worked together for a long time to benefit the Soccerplex, and I encourage anybody to reach out to Brian. He's hugely helpful, he's very responsive, and he really can help you navigate what's going on at the state level. So I think you'll find a really good friend to soccer with Brian, and thank you for coming, Brian, really appreciate it.
Yep.
Well, the fact that Trish is a constituent of mine also makes it extra special. So I didn't hire her to say all those good things, but she does. I am her senator, so that's good. It's good for me to know.
Okay, well, if there's no other questions, we'll move on. Thanks again, Brian.
Okay, thanks guys, appreciate it.
Thanks, Brian.
Bye-bye.
You can certainly stay on if you want. If not,
I think I'm gonna bug out, but thanks guys. Bye-bye.
all right. Thanks so much.
Okay.
Thanks, Brian.
Okay, guys, I hope that was helpful. Now the soccer community has an advocate, a senator that we can always count on to help us out in any issues. So that's a good thing. And if you need his contact information, I could certainly get it to you, or we can actually post it on our website. For the next, I'd like to have the Maryland State Executive Director, Flo Egan, would like to chat a little bit about the National League and regional conferences that are coming on board through US Youth, and try to bring you up to date with these new programs. Essentially, there's what I know, they're trying to work with MLS and US Youth to put together a new league and conference to try to pick up some of these DA players that might not be able to land a home somewhere. So Flo, go ahead.
Sure. Everyone knows, obviously, when the Federation shut down the DA, there were DA clubs that are academies that are connected to our MLS professional clubs across the country. And there's also some DA clubs and academies that are not directly connected, but they played within the same leagues. So what USU Soccer has done is we have our National League, and what they will do now is the National League was always when you were in the National League, you could be flying all over the country to play your games. What they're doing now is they anticipated to roll this out a year to a year and a half from now. However, with the DA shutting down, they felt it was imperative to roll it out immediately. And I know they are in talks every day just about with MLS to see what it is that we can do together to make sure that these players all have a place to play and how they can be showcased and developed to the highest level that they aspire to. So what USU Soccer has done is they've reformatted the National League, and it will be more regional centered. So currently right now there's 13 conferences. There may be more with DA clubs wanting to come back in and play. Everyone is certainly invited. And from MSYSA's perspective, we just want to make sure the players individually know that we would love to have them back in our ODP program as well and work with them through their DA clubs and whatever clubs that they're with currently. So the National League, the conferences would be regional, and there would be almost three pathways. One would be Academy, Club v Club League. Another one would be just a Club v Club League, not the Academy, and the Team v Team League. And then what the National Showcase, what they would do is they would also have, in addition to the regular league games, that would be your primary league competition operated at the regional level. The competition structure has been in place, right, since 2018. There is a 10-month scheduling window, so that's pretty broad, and a flexible conference boundaries. So, and that, what USU Soccer feels is that will help parents financially and alleviate some of their concerns about the players and getting on airplanes and traveling across the country and staying in hotels. And it just makes it financially more conducive for the families and the teams to be able to participate. Then they also will have, the new format would be the National Showcase Series. And they would be, in addition to your regular league play, it would be based on your conference performance. However, all the teams that are in Premier 2 or First Division, any team in the National League Conference, Premier or First Division, is eligible to play in the National Showcase Series. And they would not be keeping score. There would not be, placements, awards. But it's more for scouting. So you have scouting opportunities for college, for professional and international coaches to be able to scout the players at these showcases. They may be required to attend one or two during the year. They would have them over the time frames of hopefully over like holidays so that players would not be missing as much school. There'll be seminar and educational opportunities during the showcase series. And the application is open to anybody in all the conference teams. They would cross conference matches to ensure the variety of opponents. The seeding model will be used to match similar teams from different regions. So when you go to a showcase, you necessarily won't be playing the ones that you play in your conference. So I think it's a great opportunity for USU Soccer and to grow the game and to grow the league for both the team v team format and the club v club format. So I know they're very excited about moving this forward. They do have a Q&A that we can get posted up on our website. We will post all of this new conference stuff. We'll put that under USU Soccer resources so that any teams, these are for both MLS Academy teams and for any DA club that, still needs a place to play. Let's see what else they have here.
Dan, when Flo is finished, I'm going to have you come up and give a little report
Correct.
about the latest with MLS, okay?
Yeah, because they were coming out with something today, and I did not receive it yet, but I know Dan said he's got some positive news regarding the MLS league as well.
Well, hold on. That was more about, well, the league, like the first team. I'm
The first
excited.
team, okay,
So,
okay, that's what I thought, okay.
I will tell you though that I'm probably going to have someone from our academy side or the league itself potentially on next week. And they're actually on a call right now. So I'm texting them if there are questions. So I'm kind of like the middleman on that right now, but I will be quiet now.
We were, I think it's a great positive move for USU soccer across the country. I think it's just understand that we're going to make sure that those DA clubs and those DA academies, certainly nobody is left out, that we will make sure that everyone has a place to play. So I did get a graph this morning. The showcases would be based on, like I said, based on your performance. And how it impacts teams. And then your seeding for the showcases would match up how you landed in your conferences. So they're not going to take a team that would win a conference and put them against, a team that's maybe a second or third tier down. So they are going to work on that. I know Marley Wilson from USU Soccer is in charge of the league. So they've been working every day coming up with all the different scenarios, the rules, and anything that we're going to need to know going forward. So I encourage you to stay tuned, and that's pretty much it. The showcase, except for the showcase series, would be from 13U to 19U. The 12U age group was going to be evaluated by USU Soccer technical leads, and the information in that age group will be coming at a later date. But I'll make sure I get this Q&A up on our website so that anybody that wants to read it and keep tabs on what's happening there, because things are changing daily, but it's all good stuff.
All right. Well, thanks, Flo. Anybody have any questions for Flo before we move on?
Hey, Mark, I just want to touch on one real quick thing here. Yeah, well, just real quick, there is no official name for this. They're still working through the two clubs that we have in Maryland that participate in the DA. I am hopeful that we'll get a little bit more to what you alluded to. We'll hear something later today with a little bit more of an upgrade. There's still a lot of uncertainty. They're still trying to sort that out. But I can just tell you that those players that have participated in there, they're going to have a home somewhere. So I don't think anybody needs to report back to anyone. No one's going to lose out on that. That's for sure. So.
Yeah. The good news is, and what we want you to know is that there's a lot of work in the back scenes trying to make this happen. So as soon as we get a definitive answer of how this is going to be promoted, we'll definitely let you know either by next week's webinar, or even prior to that on our website. We should have some solid information. Hey, Val, you had your hand up.
Hi, everyone. My question is in regards to what Flo was explaining about the National League Showcase. Is there any information about maybe in the future going back to the regular National League, that if you win the National League, you automatically qualify for Nationals as like a shortcut? Or are we going to strictly stay the same way we are now? You got to win State Cup, then regionals to move on to Nationals. And what are your thoughts on that?
Val, they are working out the details regarding, there will be slots available that go into regional championships and then into national championships. They are working through all of that, all of those different scenarios to be able to, who would qualify at what level.
Any other questions before we move on? All right, next, Alan Lydiate, our Director of Coaching, is going to talk about coaching education, some other programs that they're working with. Go ahead, Alan.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I want to try and keep it pretty quick, because try and keep everything under the hour. I did release in the WhatsApp group this week. Hopefully you can see that. I'm just going to switch over about the club development tool. This was shared a few months back. It was essentially used for the DA to be able to monitor and assess clubs. It was released from US Soccer. There is a club development, members that obviously throughout the country. It's essentially a tool that we can use as clubs. Obviously, right now, I kind of felt it was a good time to bring up. Obviously, you as club leaders probably have a little bit more time to be able to sort of reflect. And hopefully, this is a tool that you can use pretty much just to go through the different elements of your club. And if you don't have, some of these things in place, then you can work towards it. Now, this is obviously, it's in an Excel format. So, not every club is going to have every aspect. So obviously it's going through things such as, your overall philosophy, your vision, your values, and then it goes different departments, right? So basically, what do you want to see on the field in terms of the soccer, the characteristics of your players, the development model that you use in terms of different age groups, how you're going to identify players, how you're going to develop your coaching staff, so lots of really good, areas in which you can delve deeper into. So this is a really great tool for you to be able to look at the different sections and ask questions. Okay, what do we have in place right now as a club in these areas, so that you can start to work and hopefully develop them. Unfortunately, I'm a big believer that hopefully at some point in the future, we'll get to a club standards model, something similar to maybe some of the other countries, especially at the grassroots level, so we can identify those clubs that are obviously engaging in certain aspects such as coaching development, player development, all of those areas. So like I say, right now it's really a tool. I will have this added to our website as well. My goal is to obviously support you as clubs in any of this area. Unfortunately, with all of this aspect, there's still not a great deal of resources available for you to be able to work from to build these. However, there's certainly a lot of information out there in the internet to be able to help you to establish and build your own philosophy and that type of stuff. So great tool, can be used. I'd love to, again, of more of an open discussion, I think at a later date, and certainly available to discuss any of these areas. But again, I just wanted to put it forward to you guys as a tool that you can use. Maybe now you've got a little bit of time, good to reflect, go back through, and this will give you a little bit of structure to look at certain areas within your club. So that's the club development tool. Any questions on that real quick? Again, I'm trying to push through so we can keep it under the hour. No, good. So again, feel free to reach out in the WhatsApp group if we do have any questions, or give me a call, and I'd love to discuss through some of those areas. Just to follow up on last week, we had a fantastic response. I think we, lots of new licenses, lots of applications for new licenses for the sports session planner. One thing I do ask is, once you apply through the Google form for the license, we send away for the license, and then they send you an automatic email. That email will come from admin@sportsessionplanner.com. And it is basically it's for you to activate your license. So we had probably about 40 new licenses, and only 6 have been activated. So that means, a lot of you've either received that information and it's in your spam folder, or you've not obviously opened the email yet. So be sure to go in, or encourage your coaches to go in and check admin at Sports Session Planner. And hopefully, activate your licenses. Any trouble with that, you can always reach out to myself or Nathan, and obviously we'll help you get that set up. So let's open it up. Any questions with regarding anything that we've discussed today? Sounds like it's good.
Not so. Then we'll figure that next week we'll have another webinar at 11:30 next Friday. We're working. I'm going to work with Dan on possibly getting somebody from MLS to pop on the call next Friday if we can.
Yeah.
That would, we'll follow up with an invite next week to confirm who our guest speaker is, but that's who we're shooting for next week, is some input from MLS. We're going to continue these as I said over the past couple of weeks. We're going to do this every Friday. It appears that they're working, because I feel even though we're still in this disaster with this COVID, I feel that the state seems to be calm. The clubs are calm. We've tried to answer every question that we can. We're trying to help as much as possible. We've gotten local leaders, state leaders, US youth leaders, and we're really trying to stay on top of everything we can. We're going to bring you daily information. It's going to be on our website. I know it's a lot of information, but it's a good source to get instant articles and up-to-date news, because as soon as we get it, we post it on our site. So with that being said, Dan,
I have one quick question, and I don't know, maybe another club leader will know this. I mean, I've been trying to get a little bit more clarity. We've heard from like CCL is doing, I kind of know what they're doing, EDP, which really affects a lot more of the clubs here in Maryland, but has anyone heard anything more about NCSL? The last thing I have heard is that they were going to make a decision by May 18th at a board of directors meeting, and that's the only thing I know.
Anybody have any input?
I have not heard anything. They have not contacted the state with anything other than that they were going to make a decision on the board at their board meeting.
Okay.
We have a question here that's coming through. Hold on.
Also, while you're looking at the question mark, I just want to remind everybody, we are physically moving our offices next week. So we'll be in and out. We all are working remotely, so we have emails, but some of the files and stuff that maybe we would need to get to answer questions, once we can unpack those boxes, we'll certainly help you the best we can, but just be patient, because we're going to be in our new offices starting next week. And we're excited that once all this COVID stuff is over, we hope to have a welcome reception to for all our clubs to come and have like a, meet and greet physically at the new office. We are moving in Howard County, so it'll be more centrally located, and we hope you'll come and visit.
We got a information.
Yeah.
NCSL is going to release a statement today, so we'll see what happens.
Okay.
Yeah, last one
Also
for me,
remember
Mark.
that- Go ahead.
Sorry, on the coaching ed side, next week I'm going to address, well, actually two things. I did mention last week that US coaching education is now postponed till the end of June. So the C license we're looking is on hold. We're looking to shift that and rearrange the new dates. And obviously the second meetings of those D licenses. But next week, I plan on sort of doing a small presentation on how clubs can establish, coaching courses and host coaching courses. And obviously what the process is and how they go about that. So that's going to be my presentation for next week.
Sounds good. So remember, when this is all over and we're back to normal and the kids are on the fields and when we're at least 70, 80, 90% back to normal. We're still going to have these webinars. We're going to probably spread them out, and we'll probably do one a month just to keep in contact with the clubs, answer questions. Everybody has something different. We have a lot of people that have questions about rec. We have people that have questions about ODP, about the new league that's happening, about State Cup, Presidents. There's a lot of different things that are always coming up on a daily basis. And this is a good tool to keep in contact with everyone. So anyway, stay safe, wash your hands. And I actually read something this morning that was really alarming, but I wanted to bring this up to you guys. And I actually talked to a doctor this morning about it, and he confirmed it. The article was written by a doctor that said that a lot of times the COVID is in your system and you don't even know it. And the only reason you finally realize it is you have trouble breathing. And so once you get to the hospital and then the damage is already done, and that they put you on a ventilator, and it's the worst part of this virus is that it's kind of like a surprise attack. So everyone who's still on the line, keep in constant contact with yourself and make sure, you don't have to be neurotic, but you really need to make sure that if you feel like you're breathing a little heavier than normal, you should really take heed to that. And you can actually buy one of those oximeters that you see at your doctor's office, where you put it right on your finger, and you want to be between 95 and 99. That's the perfect oxygen in your system. And they're about $50. And the doctor I spoke with this morning agreed that you should buy those, because that's a good indicator that something's going wrong. Even if you don't feel bad, if your oxygen levels are low, below 95, then you should be concerned. That's it. Stay safe. We'll see you guys next week, 11:30 on Friday.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.
Thanks. Hey, Trish, if you're still on the line.
I am.
Okay, that PSA, we're working through our digital team, and that's something I'm going to share with Maryland as well when we get it. We're
Fabulous.
working on it. So they're
Thanks
just
so much.
They're just slammed, the digital team. So, but they're trying to get that pushed out. Basically, if anybody else is hearing, all these kids that are out there on fields, where Trish has got a really cool idea utilizing some of our players and other professional athletes. I don't know, maybe it's just a Montgomery County thing, but we're working on a PSA for her, and we're just trying to push that through with the other 100,000 things, the league ones, and U.S. soccer and stuff. So
I really appreciate your help.
but it got pushed to the front of the line, so we'll
Thank you.
hear something today. Okay.
Thanks.
Okay.
That's
Take
great.
care.